Roll call, please.
Carter.
Here.
Huffman.
Here.
Mattis Castillo.
Here.
McDonough.
Here.
McGuire.
Here.
Reinhardt.
Here.
Ortega.
Aye. I'll entertain a motion on the agenda of February 26th.
So moved. Second.
Hearing no discussion, roll call.
Huffman.
Aye.
Mattis Castillo.
Aye.
McDonough.
Aye.
McGuire.
Aye.
Reinhardt.
Aye.
Carter.
Aye.
Ortega.
Aye. Entertain a motion on the minutes of January 8th.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing no discussion, roll call.
Huffman.
Aye.
Mattis Castillo.
Aye.
McDonough.
Aye.
McGuire.
Aye.
Reinhardt.
Aye.
Carter.
Yes.
Ortega.
Aye. Item number 4, Transit Impact Research Program presentation. You want to come forward and introduce yourself, please?
Mr. Chair and the board, good morning. I'm grateful for the opportunity to present this research. My name is Ali Reza Khani, and I'm an assistant professor at the Department of Civil, Environmental, and Geoengineering at the University of Minnesota. And my colleague, Don Hood, is here from Center for Transportation Studies. I'm going to present some of the research findings based on the after study of the A-line impact. And I'm going to start with some introduction on the A-line service. So A-line is an arterial BRT, or in some of the literature is known as BRT Light, because it has most of the features of a bus rapid transit, including wider doors for faster passengers boarding and alighting, relatively short headway of 10 minutes, off-board fare collection that again helps makes passenger boarding and alighting faster, and relatively longer spacing between the stops to make the service faster. But the one important feature of BRT does not exist for arterial BRT, in this case A-line, and that's an exclusive service lane. So in this case, A-line buses stop online, which means that for the duration of the time that they are stopping at the bus stop, they can block one lane of traffic. So the research question was around this feature of A-line. For those of you who are not familiar with A-line service, just in case, it runs on Snelling Avenue from Rosedale Transit Center all the way down to Ford Parkway, and then connects to Metro Blue Line at 46th Street Station. It also intersects with the Snelling with the Metro Green Line at the Snelling and University. So the research questions in this study were, we had two research questions. One, how does bus operation impact traffic? In other words, the buses stopping online, do they increase traffic delay or decrease traffic capacity or not? The second question was on the user's perception of A-line service. We were interested to know how people perceive A-line service compared to other buses and LRT service, etc. So I'm going to talk about the traffic impact first, the first question. So to answer this question, if I go back to the previous slide, we selected two stations for data collection, Snelling and University and Snelling and Dayton, and that was through communication with MnDOT and other stakeholders. We selected these two stations for data collection. We set up cameras at these two stations in both directions, and we collected about more than 1 month of video data from traffic and buses operating in the corridor. So the duration covered both days outside the state fair and both days during the state fair. So we wanted to see how the impact is during the state fair days. And then we processed the video data and we did some statistical analysis, and here is some of the findings. So when we look at the dwell time, which is basically the time that the bus stops at the station and potentially blocks traffic, along the A-line corridor, we see that dwell time is around 10 seconds, which is pretty low for a busy service like A-line, thanks to the offline fare payment. But at Snelling and University, we see that the dwell time is around 30 seconds, which is significantly greater than on all other stations. So then we focus on this station to see how this 30-second dwell time on average impacts traffic in the corridor. For this purpose, we compared two traffic measures. One of the queue length, the vehicular queue lengths at the intersections during the red light, before a bus arrives and after a bus arrives. The hypothesis is that the presence of a bus and blocking one lane of traffic could potentially increase the queue of vehicles. But when we plot and do the when we plot the data and did the statistical analysis, we noticed that all the points are on this before and after chart are located or clustered around the equality line. And the center of these points are actually exactly located on the equality line. So what it means is that the queue length without A-line bus present or with an A-line bus present, they're not significantly different. So there is no significant increase in the queue length due to A-line operation. The other traffic measure that we looked at was the traffic flow rate at the intersection, basically the number of cars that can pass through the intersection in 1 hour. And again, we looked at the data points before the bus arrives and after the bus arrives. Again, all the points are clustered around the equality line, and the centers are located almost exactly on the equality line. So the conclusion is that bus arrival does not decrease traffic flow at the intersection. So with these two analyses, we concluded that A-line service does not significantly impact traffic in the corridor. But then we are interested in the passenger capacity in the corridor. We wanted to know whether it improves the transit service in the corridor now that it doesn't impact traffic. So we did a comparison of before A-line in 2015 and after A-line in 2017. We compared the service before A-line opened in 2015. In 2015, we had Route 84 with 6 buses per hour. That was the service at the time. But then after A-line opened, the frequency of Route 84 was reduced to 2 buses per hour. But 6 buses are added for the A-line. So in total, we have 8 buses per hour compared with 6 buses per hour before A-line opens. In terms of the seated capacity, number of seats per hour that can be provided to users, before A-line, we had 235 passengers seats per hour, and after A-line, we have 280 seats per hour. That's a great increase in the transit service.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Just for my clarification, I don't know, can you put the chart back on, please? So, are you,
This one?
No, the one you just,
the one you
Go
had
forward
before?
one.
there.
Yeah.
It keeps going.
So-
There we go.
This one. Okay.
When you say 8 buses per hour, you're just saying the 6 are A-line and the 2 are the regular bus route?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Yes, the Route 84 service was decreased to 30 minutes headways from 10 minutes headways. So there are 2 buses per hour, but A-line is providing 6 buses per hour. So total, there is more transit service compared with 2015.
Excuse me, do you have a breakdown of how many riders are on the A-line versus the other 2 buses?
Mr. Chair, we have that the data. I don't think I have that on the PowerPoint now, but from what I remember from our analysis, we have almost equal ridership as the previous Route 84 on the new A-line service. But in addition, we have some passengers still riding the Route 84. So in total, the passenger ridership in the corridor is greater than what we had in 2015.
Okay, okay, go ahead.
I can certainly provide that.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Tony. Go ahead.
Thank you, and I know that we're on ridership at this point. But before we go too far,
And I'm forgetting to press my button, right?
Nope, you're good.
Oh, okay, thank you. So, before we go too far, I just wanted to go back to the concept of queue line that you were talking about with the A service on Snelling. And I wondered if, as you have observed, queue length not being significantly different, if that equates to queue wait time, at that intersection also not being appreciably different. I wonder, and this is just a sticky point for me, whether, for example, the queue might be waiting for 2 lights at this time rather than 1 light. And if you can just shed some light for me on how that works, I appreciate it.
Great. Mr. Chair, thank you for the great question. We did not look at the delay of cars at the intersection, but from traffic models, I can say that if we have almost the same queue length and the traffic signal is not impacted, it's the same traffic signal, we can conclude and we can infer that the delay is about the same.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr.
Go ahead.
Chair. I'm sorry, can you go back to the table, that one there? Help me make sure I'm understanding that bottom line there. So after A line, the 72 passengers per hour, that's all 8 buses combined are at University and Snelling are containing 72 passengers?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the 72 passenger per hour is total for A-line and Route 84 with reduced headway. So this is the average hourly number of passengers observed for both services.
So all 8 buses together?
Yes, but this is average across 5 weekdays and all hours of operations of the day. So, of course, during the rush hour, we observe much higher number here.
Okay, that's a good point. Okay.
So Commissioner Hoffman, that's what I was trying to get to. I think we're trying to get to the same thing. Could you, I know you don't have it with you now, but could you send us the breakdown of what the ridership is on the A-line versus the 84 bus?
Mr. Chair, yes, certainly, we can definitely follow up with that information.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, related to that, I think too, I think the average is going to be somewhat distilled. I think I'd like to know what it is during the rush hours. What are
Well, give us the breakdown for both.
thank you, yes, exactly.
Yes. I believe the information is available on the report, and I'm happy to provide the report.
Thank you.
For your consideration.
Want to see the impact?
So the conclusion from this slide is that A-line has increased transit capacity in the corridor, and also it has increased transit ridership, or more people now using transit in the corridor. That's the conclusion from this slide. And in general, from the traffic and transit analysis, we conclude that A-line operation does not have a significant impact on traffic in the corridor, and also implementation of A-line has increased transit capacity and passenger throughput in the Snelling corridor.
Mr.
Go
Chair,
ahead,
I'm going to just
Commissioner.
kind of continue my one comment, one statement further. If I could have you go back, or thank you. So 5 passengers an hour before and after 67 up to 72 means nothing to me, or it seems is very blah to me. But I think if we looked at it when we looked at the rush hour, and if the rush hour was hundreds and hundreds versus even more hundreds and hundreds, I think that's going to be where you say, okay, now it makes sense. I like the A-line. I think it's high. Whenever I see it, it's got a lot more than 9 people on it, right? I mean, it's got lots and lots of people. But I think, to me, if we can understand what the throughput is during those rush hours, I think we're going to see hopefully we'll see a much bigger delta between before and after.
Well, the A-line is a higher level of service, so we would like all our buses to have that level of amenities, so to speak.
Right.
Go ahead, Brian, you want?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Huffman, we'll dig through the data as we get it back. I mean, this is not exactly hard and fast in numbers, but from what we've seen, I'm going to get them close to right. I mean, we've seen about a 25% increase in ridership in the corridor since the opening of the A-line, while the rest of the ridership across the regular route service buses have fallen between 3 and 5% on Metro Transit. So what we've seen is the A-Line has not only sustained existing ridership, which is better than the overall system, it's actually grown. Now, 2 more buses an hour is about a 25% increase in service by number of buses. And so 5 passengers an hour weekday flow at Snelling does not reflect those numbers. And so there are other dynamics at play that you're not seeing here. And we'll dig into some of that, and we'll work with Regional Rail to send some information back to
Thank you.
everybody here.
Thank you.
Well, the University Snelling, those 2 corridors are, I believe, if not the busiest, one of the busiest
You would think
streets
so.
in the whole metro area.
Yeah.
So, for me, I like to dig more because it's not just merely saying it's a 10% or 25% increase in ridership. What does that do for the entire
Exactly.
mobility in the corridor? And if the time is the same, I was hoping for improvement, not to stay at the same level. So we're moving more people, and that's good. But then that's always going to be the issue. How do we move more and more people? But also what the travel time is. And also it has health implications, right? That corridor is the busiest in high rates of tuberculosis, asthma, and so forth because of pollution. So there are a lot of things that I'm looking at that I expected the A-Line to have impacts on.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the great comment. I'd like to add a few things and then give a partial answer later during this presentation. But a little clarification on these numbers, this 5 passenger per hour increase, that's only for 1 hour, one average hour. So of course it should be multiplied by hours of the day, days of the weeks, and in 1 year we observe a much greater number. The other thing related to this number is that because the peak hour for Route 84 and A-Line may be different, and also the peak station for A-Line and Route 84 may be different, in order to make a fair comparison of before and after, we decided to use the average hourly rather than the peak hour number. But as I mentioned, we can certainly provide that information. It's just that we wanted to make a fair comparison of before and after. And in terms of the busy corridor and the improvement in the service, we are certainly seeing an increase in the passenger throughput, but the second part of my presentation is about the perception of users of that, the A-Line service. So this is another part of the same project that, and my colleague worked on this. I'm presenting this on behalf of my colleague. So in this case, we wanted to know how our riders perceive this new service and how does it compare with regular buses, LRT, etc. For the purpose of this part of the study, we used Metro Transit's 2016 rider survey or customer satisfaction survey. That is a questionnaire that asks about the perception of riders in terms of the overall performance of the system and also the performance of individual attributes of the service. So in general, from this survey, we concluded that A-Line is perceived better than local buses by users. And also, it's perceived almost equally to LRT and commuter rail. So we have a bus rapid transit, which is something in between regular buses and LRT service, but customers perceive it almost equally to the LRT service. After doing a bunch of statistical analysis, we came up with some score that shows the importance of the service attributes. And the most important one is that the ease of fare payment, the off-board payment with the machines made it very important for the users. And also, as I mentioned, it facilitates the faster passengers boarding and alighting. Other important factors are the hours of operations, the behavior of the, the handling of concern and complaints. The behavioral rider is somewhere at the 5th one, which is still important, safety while riding, and these are all other important attributes of the A-Line.
Excuse me, what is the universe? What's 100%?
These numbers,
How-
Mr. Chair, refer to the contribution of this factor in the satisfaction of the
I know, how many
user.
people did you survey?
This is a survey conducted by Metro Transit. I don't have exact number, but I believe thousands of people were surveyed. So it's a big number of respondents. And again, these numbers should add up to 100, and the number that shows 22% for ease of fare payment means that 22% of the satisfaction comes from this attribute of the service.
And because we're specifically talking A-line, do you compare this with the regular bus service? Would this be generally the kinds of things that regular bus service riders would look at? Also, I'm guessing paying their fares easier is bigger here, but are these the kind of service attributes that every bus rider, no matter whether you're on A-line or regular bus, looks at?
Yes.
And do we have a comparison to that? I'm just curious.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. Again, we did this comparison, and the information is on the report.
Yeah.
For the interest of time, I don't include that in the presentation.
I get that.
But overall, as I mentioned, A-line is perceived more positively than regular buses.
Mr. Chair, I just want to call out one issue. One is these things I presume were people selected, there were written list of things for people to say these are important, not write-ins. And one of them is accessible for people with disabilities, which is the law. And so it isn't, the fact that we're even listing it as an attribute is a little offensive to people with disabilities because that's the law. And so their enjoyment, their ridership, all of those things apply to people with disabilities. So I just want to call that out. Thank you.
Very good, I agree.
Mr. Chair, thanks for
Wait a
the,
minute.
So but there is a piece to that, right?
Right.
I mean, so they can have buses that kneel and the ramp pulls out and you can get on, and they're meeting the requirement of the law.
Yeah.
Or they could have level boarding where you can just go right in the bus like anybody else
So
can,
then we
right?
should call that out.
And nothing special
Yeah.
happens, right?
Right.
So there's a difference. They're meeting the law in both cases.
Right.
But the experience is much better when they're just moving onto the bus like everybody else does, rather than having to have a bus kneel, a ramp pull out, and everybody wait for them to get on the bus.
Absolutely.
That's not a good experience.
Right. I would just say that needs to be fleshed out, so it's about their comfort and accessibility more than just, is it accessible?
Right.
Yeah.
And to Commissioner McDonough's point, that's the issue that we've been dealing with on the gold line, and that is to make sure that we have level platforms in
Exactly.
all the stations. And that was not true for downtown St. Paul, and to your point, we need to keep advocating because, and to your point,
Yeah.
it shouldn't be there, it should be part of the experience.
Exactly.
And then you can measure them.
That's right.
Mr. Chair, and thanks for the great comment. First, I apologize for my lack of knowledge because, as I mentioned, the second part of the research is is conducted by my colleague, and I'm presenting on behalf of him. But if I may add that this list is not the complete list of all the attributes, and there are attributes that are not included because their relative importance was lower than what we are seeing here. So I'm pretty sure that the accessibility feature was part of the questionnaire, but it doesn't show up in the statistical analysis as the most important factor.
Well, you know, if I was to go by this chart, and if the biggest attribute is paying my fare is easy, then the question is, why don't we do it for all the buses, regardless if they're BRT or not, because the assumption is it would increase ridership, right?
Well, Mr. Chair, I guess
If it's the highest attribute. But go ahead.
I think this is
Just to comment on this, you know, I'm all about shelter and station conditions, and I think we should have great stations, and I always thought that would be a higher priority. I'm just amazed that it's not as high as all of these other things, which is really a personal kind of relationship. Well, you know, courteous driver, personal safety, you know, these are things that we really can work on, you know, without a lot of you know, the shelter conditions, even though I think we should totally have great shelters.
Go ahead, Tony.
And that leads us to how data doesn't necessarily give you all the information. And so, you know, while we could say so very many things
Right.
and comment on what you see here, I appreciate that you are showing us what shows up as most important on the A line for that ridership. It may look different if we're looking at other lines. You know, we may see an entirely different picture. But on this day on the A line, that's what the responses were. I appreciate that. We'll have to work on how it's interpreted because indeed we absolutely want to make sure that accessibility for people with disabilities is high and very favorable, that we have clean stations, et cetera. I don't think you're telling us that that is the order in which we are delivering on these service attributes, but just that that is what was said about this particular, or in response to these particular questions. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chair, yes, I agree. Yes, this is what the data is telling us, not necessarily what.
And it doesn't tell us everything. Thank you.
No, and quite frankly, and all we're doing is questioning, because as Commissioner Carter said, you know, any given set of data could be presented in more than one way.
That's right.
Exactly. Mr. Chair, if I may.
Continue, please.
So the next slide shows, I'm hoping that it kind of addresses some of the questions. So we did some statistical analysis. We tried to categorize the attributes to the delighters or satisfiers, and these are the attributes that do not providing them does not have a negative impact on user perception, but providing them may satisfy and delight users. And also there are some frustrator attributes that not providing them would frustrate users. And as you see here, the red one shows handling of concerned complaints. So the score is 4, which means that 4 out of 5, which means that on the A line, complaints and concerns are handled pretty well. But this shows up as a frustrator. It doesn't mean that the riders are already frustrated. It means that this is an important factor, and we should pay more attention to that, because if concerns and complaints are not handled well, people may get frustrated. On the other hand, hours of operation is a satisfier. It means that extended hours of operation would satisfy riders. They might not necessarily expect it necessary for all the service, but if we provide service for an extended hours, it will satisfy riders. And the blue one shows kind of the hybrid things that may have a linear positive or negative impact. These are the things that one would generally expect from a transit service, and that's the total travel time and also the reliability of travel time. These are the things that should exist all the time. Improving them will satisfy riders, and poor performance on these would frustrate riders. But overall, as we see here, the rating of most of these attributes are relatively high from the 5 scale. And these highlighted features are the improvement priority for the service provider.
So I think I like this chart. I really, I'm fascinated by these classifications, and when you send us information, and maybe it's deeper in the report, just the definitions you just gave.
Certainly.
But can you just help me with the delighter? The personal safety while riding is a delighter. I would say that would be something that if that wasn't felt, that you would not actually ride. I mean, which of these classifications is, if it's not provided, they won't ride? I would have guessed that was it, but I'm not sure that's what delighter means. So can you help me with that? And maybe I'm wrong, that personal safety while riding isn't that function that if it's not there, they're not going to ride. So I'm just curious with these classifications. I want to make one of these classifications that if it's not provided, I'm not riding. If it's provided, great, I'm happy, but I don't have to have it. I'm thinking in those terms of these classifications. So it's maybe a longer conversation, but maybe we could get some definitions. But maybe on that one, could you just give me some more insight into that one?
Thanks for the great question. Mr. Chair, I don't necessarily want to justify the result. I wish my
Right.
colleague was
I
here
agree.
to defend this.
I agree.
But what I can mention is that these are in relevance to all other services by Metro Transit. It may be that this is a delighter because on A line, riders are perceiving a greater personal safety feeling. That's why it shows up as a delighter
As a delay.
on A line.
Not a required, yeah, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, that helps a bit. Be fascinating to see
Thanks.
this on other.
So that's my last slide. So the key findings from the user behavior is that A-Line is perceived better than local buses and almost equally as light rail transit. The most important attributes, according to users based on their rating, is that the fare payment is easy, hours of operation is sufficient, and handling of concern and compliance as well. And improvement priorities from the statistical analysis is that the hours of operation may be considered for greater extension, personal safety while riding, reliability and travel time. These could be the improvement priorities for the operator. So in general, A-Line doesn't impact traffic significantly. It increases transit capacity and transit throughput. It's perceived better than local buses, and it's perceived almost equally to LRT and commuter rail. With that, I'd like to thank the board, and I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Any other further questions? Thank you very much, and for putting up with our, go ahead.
I just want to say thank you. We asked
Yeah.
a lot of questions. It's a fascinating study. I think we're all very interested in this, and since it runs the big line running through my district, I really appreciate this study and look for more information. And thank you for your great response to the questions we all asked.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the support of research at the university, and I'm more happy with receiving questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have,
Nope,
we have,
I'm ready to give them more money.
we have, are you their advocate? Item number 5, Transit Way Impact Research Program 2019 funding request. I'll entertain a
Move
motion.
approval.
Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Huffman.
Aye.
Metis Castillo.
Aye.
McDonough.
Aye.
McGuire.
Aye.
Reinhardt.
Aye.
Carter.
Aye.
Ortega.
Aye. Any corridor updates? Victoria?
Well, I just wanted to comment that we are going to be having a Rush Line Corridor Policy Advisory Committee meeting on Thursday, the 28th. I am going to be in transit to the National Association of Counties Conference, but we are looking forward to finalizing the next phase of what are we going to study, because we're in the environmental phase for Rush Line. There has been a consensus on the White Bear Lake City Council regarding the preferred site, and in fact, this evening is when they will be voting on that. So I think that we are moving along in the way that we have anticipated, trying to answer questions and make sure that people understand where we're at in this process as far as the environmental analysis and putting funds towards what we really think is going to be the end result, but we don't know until we do that analysis. And a lot of people kind of have looked at these, and I know it's happened with the other lines as well, that when we get into this certain phase, they think it's going to happen tomorrow. Well, we got a lot of work to do. So I'm hopeful that that will be completed tonight and we can move forward. There are 21 stations altogether on Rush Line, and there's similar work that's going on all along that line and working out the details of, okay, what are we actually going to study? So it's an exciting time for Rush Line.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I don't.
Which one?
not me. I don't know.
Okay, go ahead.
I thought she was gonna talk. Just on the 35W North Corridor Coalition, which has been operating, and we now have we have a min-pass lane going in there, and so our next meeting of that is going to be to discuss whether that coalition continues on in the manner that it's been continuing, and it's, going to be my recommendation that we participate, but maybe not monetarily, but just to to have it go in the best way possible with the surrounding communities, and that those alternate routes that are going to be used when 35W is under construction, that we're working with MnDOT as much as we can on that. So just wanted to let you know that that's coming up, and that discussion will happen on the future of the coalition at the next meeting.
And I just want to say thank you again to the Perry Island Indian community and their tribal council for meeting with Ramsey County and the Met Council last week, addressing the issues on the Riverview Corridor. And if there's no further business, we're adjourned. Thank you.
All right, 10 minutes?